Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. South Africa's first government-owned satellite finally lifted off into space this week on board a Russian rocket. The locally developed and built SumbandilaSat was launched by the Russian space agency Roscosmos from Kazakhstan. We are joined by Engineering News senior contributing editor Keith Campbell, who closely follow developments around Sumbandila. Keith, welcome to Second Take. The week started off with a lot of excitement as the Russians prepared to launch the rocket, but it eventually only started its journey on Thursday evening. What happened?
Rockets are incredibly complicated pieces of machinery. The Russian rocket that launched Sumbandila, Soyuz 2, is the safest and most reliable space rocket there is in the world. But it's still a very complicated piece of machinery, and a space rocket can be described, with not too much exaggeration, as being a barely controlled explosion, and a big explosion. Before ground control will allow the rocket to go, all systems must be working. All systems must be go, a phrase that comes from the American space program. And it was a case that all systems were not go. Therefore, they delayed the launch, originally for Tuesday evening. It was given a 24-hour hold, again to use the jargon, because they were having a glitch in the telemetry. The telemetry is the data that's transmitted from the rocket to the ground control, and also because the weather was too bad for the launch. Of course, with a rocket, it's not really the weather at the ground that's important, it's also the weather all the way up to the edge of space. 24 hours later, they had a problem in the fueling process. Apparently, there was some kind of problem with a pipeline or a fueling hose which had to be replaced, and that delayed the fueling process too much. Soyuz rocket is powered by a mixture of kerosene, highly refined kerosene, which is the fuel, and uses liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. Oxygen is needed for the reaction. Liquid oxygen has to be kept at least at minus 183 degrees centigrade and evaporates incredibly easily. So they finish fueling normally only 20 minutes before launch, but the process was taking too long. Therefore, they scrubbed the launch again and imposed another 24-hour hold. Finally, it launched at 17:55 South African time on Thursday evening.
Keith, there were also previous more major delays. Can you just talk a bit about that?
Well, yes, the original plan had been to launch SumbandilaSat back in 2007. It would have been launched by the Russian Ministry of Defense from a Russian Navy ballistic missile submarine. Now, that deal fell through, the reasons for which have never been officially revealed, but are believed to be concerned with an abortive South African Defence Department project for a spy satellite in cooperation with the Russian Ministry of Defence. This project apparently was never officially approved in South Africa, never officially funded, but the Russians found that out too late. And after they had, I believe, spent some money in the project, the Russian Ministry of Defence was very annoyed with South Africa and cancelled that launch. Roscosmos, which is Russia's civilian space agency, not under the Ministry of Defence, was rather distressed at this because they wished to promote space cooperation with South Africa, and they stepped in and offered a replacement launch from land on one of their Soyuz civilian rockets. And this was agreed to. But rockets and satellites aren't Lego blocks. You don't just clip them together. It takes a degree of integration, planning, adaptation to be able to fit a satellite to a rocket for launch. And the South African planning had been to fit Sumbandila to be compatible with the Navy rocket. It needed some further planning to make it compatible with Soyuz. So that caused pretty much a 2-year delay. Now, originally been hoped to launch Sumbandila on the Soyuz early this year, March. The Sumbandila is a microsatellite. So it was a secondary payload for the Soyuz rocket. The primary payload was a Russian Meteor-M meteorological satellite. Now, the Meteor-M is the latest version of the Meteor weather satellites. It's the first in a new generation. It's got new systems, new equipment, and it proved, it turned out to take longer to debug these than the Russians had originally hoped. Space is difficult, space is complicated, it's not easy, and it did take them longer, despite the great experience with spacecraft, to get it cleared for launch than expected. And it was these issues with the Meteor which caused several delays. But finally, the Meteor was cleared for launch and was launched successfully with SumbandilaSat and with 5 other microsatellites.
Well, SumbandilaSat is now in orbit around the Earth, but what has it actually been designed to do, and how will South Africa benefit?
Well, SumbandilaSat is primarily an Earth imaging or Earth observation satellite. It's equipped with a multispectral imager, also built in South Africa by Sunspace Information Systems, who built the satellite itself. It's got a resolution of 6.5 meters by 6.5 meters, which means it can see objects that size and bigger. It is going to be used for a whole variety of Earth observation purposes: planning, agriculture, disaster management. Just about everything these days benefits from satellite imagery. Now, you can buy this commercially, and indeed South Africa can actually obtain some images free from foreign satellites. But having the country's own satellite means that it has been put in an orbit that is most optimal for South Africa, and it means it's under South African control, so the South Africans can maneuver it to meet the country's specific needs. Whereas with a foreign satellite, you can request that they can maneuver it, but maneuvering a satellite takes energy. And if you're maneuvering a satellite, it cannot do something else. So if you put in a request to a foreign country or overseas company to maneuver their satellite, they may not be able to comply. There may be conflicting requirements, and they may have to say, sorry, we can't do it. With a South African satellite, those problems fall away, and if there's a priority issue like needing to image a disaster area, flood area, a drought zone, the satellite can be maneuvered, no problem.
SumbandilaSat is not the first South African satellite that was sent into space. Can you talk a bit about the first one?
Well, the first South African satellite that reached space was SunSat, which was launched by NASA free of charge in 1999. That was developed by staff and postgraduate students at the University of Stellenbosch. And indeed, it is from that expertise that Sunspace Information Systems was developed and that Sumbandila was developed. That was basically an experimental satellite to show that South Africa had the capacity to design and build microsatellites. To a certain degree, Sumbandila is also experimental in that for the first time South Africa is going to have mission control over satellite and is going to be developing its expertise in operating satellites.
Does South Africa plan to send any more satellites into space in the near future?
There is definitely an intention to design and build and have launched satellites in the coming years. I'm not certain that there's any formal time scale yet. I'm not certain there's any formal budget yet, but there is definitely a requirement, there's definitely a need. Basically, satellites are now fundamental to a huge swathe of planning and economic activities.
Keith, thank you very much. That's the Second Take show for today. Thank you for watching, and join us again next week for more news analysis.